Hello, and welcome to another edition of Right with Nacho Falafel. Today, our topic's going to be the first person point of view. Now, I would argue that the first person point of view is the most popular point of view with beginning writers. And I think it's because the first person point of view feels like the most natural way to tell a story. I mean, like, we do it every day, right? Most interactions that we have are just us telling first-person accounts of some event that happened to us in our past. So it only seems logical that our first instinct as writers is to use the I when telling a story. And this is great. There's nothing wrong with writing a story in the first-person point of view. A lot of my favorite authors only write from the first-person perspective. Every writer gets to choose the point of view that's right for their story. But I guess the question is, why do writers choose to write from the perspectives that they choose to write from? I mean, like, maybe like that's not always obvious to us, especially when we're coming into writing, or maybe we just never really thought about this question before. But especially as early writers, we simply come up with ideas and write our stories down. And I can't overemphasize this enough. Like, just getting your story down is the most important part. All this other stuff, like, it is less important than just writing your story. So everything I'm going to tell you, all of my advice, can be implemented at any point in the writing process. No one is going to sit down and write a killer first draft, and anyone who claims that they are isn't being honest with themselves. You get your stories down on paper, and then you edit. The better you get at editing, the better your stories become, and the better writer you become. But even with years of practice, every sentence can be improved upon. Every paragraph can still be modified. Entire chapters can still be rearranged. So don't get discouraged. Don't get discouraged by the process. But let's get back on track. So why do we write from the first person? I guess the easiest answer is that the first person point of view allows the reader the greatest level of intimacy with the character. Not only does your character get to tell your story, but they also get to tell the story like their way, which is an extremely powerful position to be in for anybody. Telling a story is power. So remember, we tell first-person narratives like every single day of our lives. Think of the way you tell your story to your friends, or the way they tell stories to you, maybe. Even if your friend isn't a good storyteller, they're still able to tell the story using their own distinct voice, like a language that you recognize that belongs as uniquely to that person. The characters you write have the ability to tell their stories using whatever language you choose. First-person narration gives us the freedom to write in a more natural language that feels unique to readers and makes our characters come to life in, like, more tangible ways. I guess the other advantage to writing in the first person is your ability to explore the inner workings of your character's mind. A good storyteller will use first-person perspective to give the reader details about a scene in a way that allows the reader to truly see the scene from that character's perspective. As an example, an early draft might read, the room was filled with boxes and the carpet was stained with black spots. And an improved draft would say something, if it was paying attention to the character's perspective, it might read something like, boxes were stacked shoulder high, and I had to squeeze to move between them, holding my breath, scooting my feet across black stains that I hoped weren't mold. The second version uses the same two details about the room, but also offers additional details to tell us how the character reacts to the environment. And that's really an important component of first person's perspective. Like, we are inside that character's head. So, when do you choose to use a first person perspective? I guess is the question. And the short answer is anytime you want. The longer answer is that not every story can be told using the first person perspective. So then, like, how do you know? How do you know when to use the first person perspective? But generally speaking, first person narratives are great for getting readers deeply involved in the lives of your character. Whether you're telling a love story or a gripping espionage tale, first person perspective gives you the powerhouse of tools necessary to create a character that will stick with people for years after they finish your novel. Unfortunately, sometimes our stories aren't right for the first person perspective. And that's because that perspective gives us such a deep view of the character. We can't always get away with everything. For example, if you're telling a story and you want to reveal in the second half of your novel that your narrator is actually a space alien who's been disguising themselves to infiltrate humans or whatever, your readers aren't going to like that. Not only because that's like a terrible plot, but because first-person narration doesn't allow us to fool the reader the same way third-person narration would, for example. Because in first-person point of view, whatever your character knows, your reader also has to know. Otherwise, your reader is going to feel cheated, as though you're purposely withholding information that's vital to the story, just hoping to toy with their emotions or to pull the plot along in some way. And that's really, like, not cool. So don't do that. But honestly, though, one of the hardest things about writing in the first person is avoiding beginning every sentence with, like, I. And I think that's because so much of our first person narration experience comes from, like, telling stories that we feel compelled to keep the reader, like, up to date on the movements of our character, because we think that's kind of like what you would do. But unfortunately, the effect of that is a lot like paragraphs that sound like, I did this, and then I did something else, and then I did this other thing, and then Sam walked in, and it's bad. It's not. It doesn't come off well. It comes off as, like, terrible storytelling. So if we keep in mind that our writing is a supplement for actual first-person human experience, it becomes easier to write toward creating a vivid experience for our readers rather than merely walking them through the steps it took for our character to reach from point A to point B. The more detail you can give about your setting from the perspective of your character, like, the better. This will naturally break apart the ice within the writing and give your scenes a much more natural feel. I guess, like, let's use an example where a character walks into a bar. So instead of writing, I walked into a dimly lit bar and saw a barman watching TV. I casually walked up to the bar and stared at the television. What you watching? I asked. We could try writing something else, like, the bar was dimly lit and mostly empty. A thin layer of dust covered the tables, and pine shavings were spread across the floor. A man leaned behind the bar and watched an overhead television. I casually leaned over against the bar next to him and eyed the screen. What you watching? I asked. Now, whether or not you liked that second one better, by describing the setting in that way, we're able to explore both the location and our scene through our character's opinion. One of the biggest strengths of writing in the first person is the perspective's ability to allow us as the writers to explore the inner workings of the character's mind while also making them feel more alive to the readers. In reality, the more you know about a person, the more you're likely to care about the well-being of that person and what happens to them. And the same is true for fiction. If you create a strong enough bond between your reader and your characters, your readers will develop a real-life vested interest in the fictional lives that you create. And the easiest way to accomplish this goal and create this bond is by letting your readers inside your character's head as often as isn't obnoxious. So If your character is drinking coffee, your readers don't necessarily need to know their thoughts on that particular brew of coffee, or where the bean came from, or any of that other information. Unless that detail reveals to the reader that your character is somehow an expert barista and that information is relevant to the outcome of your story. It's totally fine for some details to just be details. Like, you're allowed to just drink coffee and not have any other thoughts about it. So, like I said, the first person narrative is a really powerful way to tell your story. The characters you develop are as unique as you are, and the way they see the world is vital and like of the utmost importance to the telling of your story. So don't short sell your characters by stunting their ability to interact with the world that you're providing for them. Get your characters in there, get them involved, get them thinking, get them smelling, get them touching, get them doing everything. Just create that emotional connection between your reader and your character, and you'll be all set and ready to go. So that's all I've got for this time. So until next time, keep scribbling. Ahoy! If you're enjoying the YouTube series and you want to support, consider picking up a copy of my book, The Patron Saint of Pinball, available on Amazon.